When the logging industry began cutting down the old-growth redwoods of Northern California in the late 1800s and early 1900s, it sparked two major reactions. One reaction was that of the conservationists, who believed that the ancient trees should be protected and not cut down, and the other, the loggers, who wished to continue their harvest of the ancient trees. These two differentiated and conflicting perspectives would continue to clash throughout the 1900s and influence the communities of the Redwood Coast. In the 1850s, the newly formed state of California experienced drastic population growth due to the discovery of gold in its rivers. It drew many miners to the state, leading them to travel throughout California to stake claims at various rivers, hoping to get their hands on gold, which included areas as far north as Humboldt and Trinity counties, and around the Trinity River. With many people flooding in, towns such as Eureka, Trinidad, and Union, later being renamed Arcata in 1860, were established. This led many people to capitalize on the demand for services and goods such as clothing and lumber, and to create businesses to extract the resources of the land and generate wealth. Because of these demands, people began turning to the forests of large old-growth redwoods that encompassed the coasts of California, and the logging industry greatly increased and expanded. However, because many of the tools they had were used for smaller trees like spruce and fir, logging was slow, sometimes taking around a week to cut down a single tree. This led to improvements in the tools to be able to cut down larger trees more efficiently. The axes were redesigned with longer handles and double edges. A saw called a crosscut saw was lengthened to fit across the trunks of redwood trees, and handles were added on either side so two people could work together. An incredibly clever invention, made in 1882 by John Dolbear, was the steam donkey. It was a steam-powered machine designed to transport giant felled trees down from steep and dangerous terrain and bring logs down to mills. Named green gold, the lumber made from them was marketed to buyers across the country, raising the desire for the old trees. The market for old-growth redwoods increased as the gold rush slowed down, and many people found work in the timber industry. By this point, around 85% of the old-growth redwoods remained uncut. The redwood timber harvest slowed significantly during the Great Depression, with many smaller mills and companies completely shutting down. However, the post-World War II economic boom and the invention of tools such as chainsaws and bulldozers once again significantly boosted the rate of timber harvest. By 1960, almost 90% of the ancient coastal redwoods had been felled. In the early days of redwood logging, not many people opposed it, mostly because they needed the wood for housing, and it seemed as if the supply was limitless. However, that changed in the year 1900 when a group of women founded the California Federation of Women's Clubs. This club focused on many things, but one of its early priorities was the preservation of the ancient redwoods of Northern California. While there were men like John Muir who spoke on the issues surrounding redwood logging, the women took a different approach by connecting redwood forestry practices and conservation to traditional gardening, focusing on care and stewardship of the land, which drew the attention of women and others who might not have known about the logging of the redwoods or thought it was a problem. Many of the women in Humboldt County at the time were the wives or daughters of men who worked in the timber harvest industry. As witnesses to the devastation from logging, it was a sad sight to see. However, many of the women did not want to oppose logging outright because their wealth and life depended upon the industry. Instead, they pushed for the conservation of certain groves. In 1908, the Humboldt County Federation of Women's Clubs was formed.
Kind of helped start this conservation movement, and they did things like got students to write letters, and these letters went all the way to Washington, D.C., and caught the eye of the president at the time.
The president responded to these letters, saying that he was exceedingly anxious to assist. In 1913, the HCFWC created the Redwood Park Committee, led by Laura Parrott Mahan. They sent a letter to Congress stating that civilization demands that the natural wonders of the world be preserved for future generations to study and enjoy. The greatest of all natural wonders that make our country so interesting and attractive are the giant redwood trees of California, the greatest natural monuments of the Creator's handiwork. Save the Redwoods League, a league of their own. The Redwood Parks Committee, following this letter, focused on identifying a grove to protect, settling on a beautiful grove called Carson Woods near the town of Fortuna. But despite their best efforts to protect it, the project stalled, and in 1915, Carson Woods was tragically logged. In 1917, three conservationists, John Marion, Madison Grant, and Fairfield Osborne, nudged by National Parks Director Stephen Mather, set out on a road trip down what is now known as the Redwood Highway to see the magnificent trees of the California coast. They saw that the beautiful groves of old-growth redwoods were being felled, and, quote, the beauty and tranquility of the primeval redwood forest filled them with awe, but the accelerating rate of its destruction horrified them. Save the Redwoods League, Mission and History. They then decided to do what they could to protect the remaining redwoods. As a starting point, the men bought a few groves of ancient redwoods, and just a year later, in 1918, three men established the Save the Redwoods League. In 1919, the men spoke in an auditorium in Eureka about the loss of ancient redwoods, which inspired the women to form the Women Save the Redwoods League. Joining forces with the California Federation of Women's Clubs, they saved 3 major sites within 5 years. Humboldt Redwood State Park and Bowling Memorial Grove established in 1921, Richardson Grove established in 1922, and the first purchases of the land that would become Del Norte Redwood State Park in 1924. The Save the Redwoods League also helped establish the California State Parks Committee in 1927, which made the separate parks into a centralized system. This resulted in parks being more accessible to the public and generally more well-known. While the state park system helped protect some old-growth redwoods, it wasn't quite enough. After World War II, construction booms and technological advances led to the near-complete harvest of the remaining unprotected old-growth redwoods by 1960. This led to renewed efforts to establish a national park to protect the remaining ancient redwood groves, although achieving this goal would require overcoming several challenges.
Pretty much every square inch of what became Redwood National Park was held in private land. So it was all in private ownership. And to acquire it from all these different owners, there were ranchers, there was timber industry, to be able to acquire all that land would have been really, really expensive, and it turned out to be really, really expensive.
It was also the federal government that would step in to cover the expense. There was another issue, however.
Back at that time, there was a lot of controversy as to where Redwood National Park should be. One of the original sites was also the Mill Creek area, which was in Del Norte. But there was a lot of politics that was going on there because Miller Relum was the owner of that site. And that was pretty much the only industry that they had there.
Due to political conflict, it was not designated as the location for Redwood National Park. Another conservation organization, the Sierra Club, wanted the park to be around the Klamath River. However, unfortunately, the Klamath River spot was logged before anything could be done. The Sierra Club's second choice was the 90,000-acre Redwood Creek area. Commissioned by the National Park Service, the National Geographic Society surveyed Redwood Creek in 1964 and produced an issue about the survey and the discovery of the world's tallest tree, Hyperion. Public support for the conservation of the Redwood Creek area largely increased as a result of this, and in 1968, a 58,000-acre Redwood National Park was established. There was a huge problem though. While the newly formed national park protected the redwoods within the boundaries, the park was continually affected by erosion caused by ongoing logging of redwoods from surrounding uphill sites. According to the North Coast Environmental Center, the boundary of the original park was a total ecological and scenic disaster from the get-go. The Save the Redwoods League and the Sierra Club began to push for an expansion of the park, and in 1978, with public support, Redwood National Park was expanded by 48,000 acres. While many people and organizations were in favor of the park's establishment, the logging industry was not. Timber companies such as Simpson and Arcata Redwood Company produced pamphlets and spoke at congressional hearings about their opposing beliefs on the park's foundation. In response to the news of the expansion of Redwood National Park, in 1977, a group of loggers staged a protest that went from Eureka, CA to Washington, D.C. They sculpted a massive 9-ton peanut from a redwood log, strapped it to a truck, and hauled it out to D.C., where it was met with other loggers and supporters. The loggers had a popular saying, "It may be peanuts to you, but it's jobs to us." The giant peanut was offered to President Jimmy Carter as a mock present, but was turned down at the Capitol building by Carter's aides, who said that it was a waste of a perfectly good redwood. Defeated, the loggers drove the peanut back to California, where it was placed in the parking lot of a gas station to stay for nearly 50 years. Ultimately, the loggers' protests did not change anything, and in 1978, Redwood National Park was expanded.
That we have sometimes changed the economy as well as our parks, right? From an economy that's based on logging to an economy that's based on, say, tourism because of parks, or now restoration.
The redwood logging industry and conservation efforts are a significant part of Northern California's history and economy. The widespread and accelerated harvest of the old-growth redwoods in the early 1900s, made possible by inventions that increased harvesting efficiency, sparked a movement to protect the remaining old-growth forests. Conservation groups like the Save the Redwoods League, the Women Save the Redwoods League, and the Sierra Club were monumental collaborative forces in the conservation of old-growth redwoods and helped establish protected areas such as Redwood National Park. Old-growth redwood forests are an incredibly important part of the environment of Northern California as well. They protect countless species of animals, many of whom are endangered, such as the marbled murrelet, the spotted owl, and the coho salmon. With only around 5% of old-growth redwoods remaining standing, it is important to remember the legacy and history of these ancient trees and to keep them alive for future generations to enjoy and observe.